Now we're recording. So, good people, great people, God's people. Welcome to the first episode of Nigga With a Podcast. It's gonna be real interesting. It's gonna be very interesting. We're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna be covering topics that I feel need a little bit more nuance. We're gonna be covering things from a perspective that a number of other creators probably do not have, or if they do have it, we're not celebrated enough in that space of having those visions and having that voice. So we're gonna shake it up a little bit. So I'm gonna contextualize this by telling a story. Back home when I was in Chicago, I was watching, a cooking show with my grandmother. She asked me a poignant question. She said, William, she said, do you hold prejudice towards white people? And I had to answer her question affirmatively, and I said, yes. I don't think that most Black people don't have some type of prejudice towards white people just based upon historical analyses, understanding what it is and how it is that they've moved in the past, things of that nature. And as I continued to answer the question, my grandmother was quiet. She sat, she listened. And when I was done, I asked her, well, Granny, are you prejudiced towards white people? Because let's create context here. My grandmother is, if I am 29, my mother is 59, my grandmother is 89 years old. My grandmother was born in 1933. So she was born in the midst of Jim Crow etiquette, even though she was not born, or she did not live in the South. She was born in the midst of Jim Crow etiquette. So I asked her, I said, Granny, are you prejudiced towards white people? And she said, I'm trying to get away from it. But I think my prejudice comes from a place of seeing how white people treated other people, specifically Black people. And I just did not get it. I did not understand. Here's the reason why I felt like that was so poignant. Black people in this generation, we attempt to create, I'm not gonna say valid reasons to be upset, but a lot of times our experiences with whiteness are more ideological. At times they are physical, right? There are some of us as Black people who experience the physicalities of whiteness to a degree that will charge us to have those prejudices. But a lot of us have not experienced the very physical realities that our predecessors have. That doesn't mean that what it is that we are feeling or what it is that we are experiencing is invalid. It simply means that we are experiencing whiteness in a different way. With my grandmother, I knew that her experience with whiteness was very physical. I also knew that her experience with whiteness was something that we read about in history books, right? Something that we read about in articles, magazines. It's not something that we experience. We watch videos of our grandparents experiencing what it is that they experience. And the first question that I have in my mind is, I wonder how white people feel when they watch these videos. Do they feel attached, or do they identify with the people in the videos? And do they recognize that could very well be their grandparents, their uncles, or their aunts? Because that's the reality. The reality of the situation is, whiteness is an ideological structure that was placed on top of religious ideologies and politicized through moralisms and mobilized within politics so that Black people could not have access. Quite literally, how it is that they constructed whiteness was on the idea that African countries would be eternal enemies to Christian nations, labeling them as infidels, right? So I want y'all to think about that for a minute. The construction of whiteness operated on the basis that Blackness would be its eternal enemy. We have to examine that, and we have to examine the ideological and the sociological effects of that type of construction of a person, right? Because what a lot of people do not understand is that whiteness at its core, as it exists right now, is a hybrid between, how can I say this? It's a hybrid between religious imperialism and the idea that their political ideologies should unite the entire world, right? Now, what a lot of people also do not understand is that whiteness was created around the same time that the studies of Blackness or the studies of Africanity happened, pretty much in the same time frame, right? Why is this important? I feel like we as Black people do not criticize whiteness at its ideological base firmly enough for us to believe that whiteness is just that, an ideological situating that has political power to produce the consequences that it says exists within its world. In other words, white people not only have the control of the narrative, they have control of the outcomes. And when you have control of both of those things, you can make anything seem real, right? You can make anything seem as if though it's supposed to be that way. So let's fast forward a little bit. In October of 2021, the American Psychological Association released a report that essentially was an apology to BIPOC communities by stating that they did not do enough to intercept or to decentralize the ideas of racism, homophobia, sexism, and misogyny in its productions. What does that mean? That means that the premier association for constructing the reality of people's thoughts, their psychology, their understandings of the world and how it was functioning at the time in the United States of America was centralized in white supremacy. Centralized in white supremacy. They apologized for this in 2021. Psychology as a discipline, as a field, has been around for almost 200 years. That is 200 years of cooking books. That is 200 years of selective measurement. That is 200 years of outright pseudoscience. That is 200 years of consistently pumping through academia your particular construction of a reality instead of what was going on completely at the time. Why is that important? It's important because the APA is the only body that has apologized for this, even though there is a high probability that other governing bodies or other legitimizing bodies, ethical bodies of capitalistic endeavors that operate in the United States, it's a pretty high possibility that they've done the same thing, right? And we have to think about it from a critical context. The APA, once again, is the ethical body that navigated and moderated what was released into the United States as it related to mental, as it related to psychological, as it related to how it is that we thought about what it is that we saw. That's a long time to be controlling the narrative. Once again, going back to what my grandmother said, I saw how they treated people and I just did not understand it, right? To have an ideological hold or to have an ideological control over what is and what is not reality is a dangerous position to be in. And a lot of us as Black people have internalized that that's just what it is that they are. They are the authorities of knowledge, they are the creators of knowledge, and therefore they are the holders of knowledge. A lot of us have internalized that idea. A lot of us. I kind of want to get into that. Let's unpack that, right? So blackness as an idea did not start with white people.